said. It's a cracking day generally. Quite quickly this evening, though, notice how the blue hue takes hold of the map. A frost forming very quickly this evening. It's going to be a very cold night. Later in the night, cloud will spill into Northern Ireland, Western Scotland and northwest England, which will help to lift the temperatures here. But certainly across much of the south and the east, a frost and a really cold night across the south, one of the coldest of the winter so far. So a hard frost in the south on Friday morning, but then plenty of sunshine here to come on Friday. Another sunny day across the east and with lighter winds. Probably feeling a bit warmer from Yorkshire down to East Anglia. But it will be cloudier further west, and I think we'll keep a lot of cloud through the day for Wales, northwest England, Northern Ireland, Western Scotland. The odd spot of drizzle over the Highlands, but for the vast majority it's dry. Temperatures maybe a touch higher, but it won't feel as warm with the cloudier skies in the west. We'll probably feel a bit milder tomorrow in the east without those winds. The wind's picking up further in the northwest with a bit more patchy rain as we head through Friday night. There are weather fronts which will push in here this weekend, bringing some patchy rain to western Scotland. But for most places, it's dry this weekend with a mixture of cloudy spells and a bit of sunshine.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
And welcome once again to On the Money. It's your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan. For the next hour here on GB television and radio, we'll be talking about the end of those Plan B restrictions, the scrapping of anti-COVID measures in England at least, and what that means for the economy. Plus, Labour are turning the economic screw, saying the Tories are now the party of high tax. As ever, grown-up conversations with people who really know their stuff on the money after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it is 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to get you up to date in the GB News newsroom. MPs have been urged to report blackmail attempts to the police if they've been pressured by the government for calling on the Prime Minister to resign. A senior Conservative MP, William Ragg, accused the government of intimidating MPs who tried to remove Boris Johnson.
It is not their function to breach the ministerial code in threatening to withdraw investments from members of Parliament's constituencies which are funded from the public purse. Reports to me and others of members of staff at number 10 Downing Street, special advisers, government ministers and others encouraging the publication of stories in the press seeking to embarrass those who they suspect of lacking confidence in the Prime Minister is similarly unacceptable.
Downing Street says they're not aware of any evidence to support what are clearly serious allegations about lawmaker intimidation. The Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, encouraged MPs who experience intimidation to write to him.
While the whipping system is long established, it is, of course, a contempt to obstruct members in the discharge of their duty or to attempt to intimidate a member in their parliamentary conduct by threats.
The Bury South MP, who defected from the Conservatives to join the opposition, says Labour will give the country the leadership it deserves, not one they are embarrassed by. Christian Wakeford introduced a speech by the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, in Bury, saying the Conservative Party aren't even talking about the problem, let alone offering solutions.
With Keir Starmer, we are getting real, proper leadership with integrity and respect. The Labour Party is firmly back in the centre of British politics. It's in touch with working people and ready to provide an alternative government that this country can be proud of and deserves. And certainly not to be embarrassed by. And that is one of the reasons why I'm here today.
In other news now, 2 men have been arrested in Birmingham and Manchester as part of the investigation into the US Texas synagogue attack. Greater Manchester Police say they remain in custody for questioning. Malik Faisal Akram, who was investigated by MI5 in 2020, was shot dead after a 10-hour standoff with SWAT police after taking 4 people hostage. No one else was injured. Ghislaine Maxwell's legal team have filed a motion for a retrial weeks after she was found guilty of grooming underage girls to be sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein. It's after one juror said he'd failed to disclose before the trial that he was sexually abused as a child and that he described his experience during deliberations. Well, Maxwell's lawyer says the disclosures could have convinced other members of the jury to convict her. The British socialite is due to be sentenced in June. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said the EU will respond with massive economic and financial sanctions if there are further attacks from Russia on Ukraine. Well, it comes as the US President Joe Biden says he believes Russian President Vladimir Putin will move in on the nation and warns Russia it will pay a heavy price if it invades. President Putin has made a list of demands to the West as around 100,000 Russian troops are on Ukraine's border. A man's been remanded in custody after being charged with the murder of the Irish schoolteacher Aisling Murphy. Joseph Puska of County Offaly was heckled as he was taken to a hearing in Tullamore District Court last night. The body of Miss Murphy was found on the banks of the Grand Canal after she'd gone out for a run alone on Wednesday last week. The British Dental Association is warning of a mass exodus of dentists and dental nurses over mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations. All healthcare workers have until April the 1st to have 2 doses or risk losing their jobs. A survey of high street dentists has found that 9% are unvaccinated. Around 400 store management jobs are set to be lost at Primark as the retailer plans to simplify its management structure. Primark reported a 10% fall in like-for-like sales at the end of last year, attributing the drop to customers' concern over the spread of Omicron. The British clothing company has promised it will not raise prices for its spring-summer range, despite the pressures of inflation. Now, Emma Raducanu and Andy Murray have both been knocked out of the Australian Open. Both were beaten in their second-round matches. US Open champion Raducanu was hampered by blisters on her racket hand, while the 3-time Grand Slam champion Andy Murray said he was disappointed and frustrated to go out so early. You are now up to date here on GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, On the Money and Liam.
And coming up on The Money today, Plan B anti-COVID restrictions are ending in England. It was a huge policy announcement yesterday afternoon, but amidst all the political drama, you may have missed it. We discuss, will it boost the economy? Sensing the government's on the back foot, Labour's upping the ante on the economy. The Tories are the party of low growth and high tax, says the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, unveiling Labour's 5-point plan for the economy in Bury. And that location, it's no coincidence. As ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's show? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. I'll read out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. Now, yesterday was a big day in British politics as the Prime Minister slugged it out with Labour's Keir Starmer in the House of Commons. But such was the Westminster drama, a huge announcement got less attention than it deserves, perhaps. A policy move with a big and hopefully positive economic impact. The end of Plan B anti-COVID restrictions in England. After his bruising encounter of Prime Minister's questions yesterday, Boris Johnson announced that starting from today, government advice to work from home if possible no longer applies. Children won't be forced to wear masks in classrooms. And from next Thursday, that's the 27th of January, Johnson told the Commons all other restrictions will be lifted in England. So no mandatory mask wearing in public spaces, no social distancing, and no vaccine passports. Although venues can keep checking customer status on a voluntary basis if they wish. The government also intends to end the legal requirement for people testing positive to self-isolate again in England, replacing that with advice and guidance. In Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, that advice to work from home does remain largely in place for now, courtesy, of course, of the respective devolved assemblies, but that could change as well soon. This is a tough time for the UK economy, of course. Inflation's at a 30-year high. There's a serious cost of living squeeze. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves gave a speech this morning in Bury, the seat of an MP who yesterday defected from the Tories. Labour's now proudly pro-business, Reeves said, unveiling her 5-point plan to fix the UK economy. Starmer's party, said the Shadow Chancellor, now has a totally different mentality towards business than during the Jeremy Corbyn era, she said. Now it strikes me that as and when this Tory leadership crisis calms down, our two main parties are heading for a major showdown when it comes to economic policy and tackling this cost of living squeeze. But I think all parties can agree ending anti-COVID restrictions, if it lasts, should help broader commerce and prosperity. And that's today's On the Money question. Will ending Plan B boost the economy? Here on The Money, we have grown-up conversations with the people who really know their stuff. A raft of guests from all parts of the political spectrum today to discuss this. I'm delighted to be joined by Bill Esterton. He's the Shadow Business and Industry Minister. Great to see you, Bill. Welcome back to the show. Happy New Year. I don't think you've been on the show yet this year. And, of course, friend of the show in the studio, Vicky Price, the Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research. Bill, let's talk to you first. Let's talk about Plan B. I do want to come on to Rachel Reeves' speech, but you're from Merseyside. It's a part of the country where there's a lot of hospitality industries, a lot of creative industries, a lot of customer-facing cultural businesses that have been stymied by these Plan B restrictions. You must be pleased that they've been lifted.
Well, thanks, Liam. It's good to be with you. I think the more important question is whether we're going to address the long-term weakness in the economy that we saw before the pandemic. That's really the answer. And it's about the fact that we've got high inflation and we've got a raft of taxes with national insurance increases coming in April, which will hit working people and it will hit businesses as a payroll tax as well. And we face very low growth. If we look at the growth figures, actually you can compare the Labour government where it was 2.3% prior to the global economic crisis, and with the Conservatives where it was only 1.8% in the years running up to the pandemic, and the forecast now of only 1% growth in the UK compared to nearly double that across the OECD. That's really what needs to be addressed. And this is what Rachel Reeves was talking about this morning, and it's why we need to support businesses in all sectors. And you're dead right, that includes areas like hospitality and creative, where we are very, very strong in the Liverpool City region.
These Plan B measures are either over or about to be over, certainly in England. The rest of the UK, hopefully, fingers and toes crossed, to follow soon. It seems we may be entering an era of regular economic policy making, albeit amidst challenges, of course, that we discuss often here on the show. Labour are quick out of the traps, a major speech from Rachel Reeves. What do you make of it?
I think business most definitely needs support from here on. Yes, we're going to have those tax increases if they indeed go ahead. But of course, the government is going to say we absolutely need them because of the money that is required for the National Health Service. I mean, issues aren't over by any means. And we know that the NHS has been starved of the funds that it needed for quite some time. But then there are all the other issues. If you're going to be getting those regions to do really well, which is what I think Rachel Reeves is talking about, let's look outside London, let's look outside the southeast. And help them to develop more businesses and so on, then we do need to think about what the implications of that would be in terms of costs as well. The reality is that London remains the most productive, or London and the South East, the most productive part of the UK. And what we also know is that because of the pandemic, research that has been done by the Centre for Cities, for example, suggests that the costs of levelling up, if that phrase is still going to be there, and I haven't quite...
We're going to be hearing a lot more of it.
Yeah, I didn't quite see that sort of... it's implied, of course, but with some measures, if you like, that the Labour Party is now thinking of implementing if they get to power, of course. That cost has not just doubled, it's possible that it's gone up by something like 4 times. So there is a cost there. So the question is, how do you get that money to be able to do that redirection? And we still need London and the South East to be the contributors to the budgets that they have so far been.
Indeed. Bill, let's go back to you. How have we ended up in a place where it may be that the Tories are perceived to be the party of high tax and Labour the party of low tax? It's a complete reversal from the regular state of affairs.
Well, there's been a mismanagement of the economy for many years, Liam. I think that's the short answer. And the Conservatives are looking at the same failed answers that have got us to this place to start with. There's an £800 billion gap in investment between what's going on in the UK and what's going on across the OECD, and we've got to address that. We've got to get the economy firing on all cylinders again. And we don't think that you do that by choking off the recovery, by loading taxes onto working people before the economy's even had a chance to start, and indeed on businesses through a tax on payroll, which is why we are opposed to the national insurance increase. We also think you actually need to increase incentives, which is why we're advocating scrapping business rates and supporting businesses across the economy by having a fairer system. So ultimately, it's about having a fair system of taxes, not about having no taxes at all.
But briefly, Bill, that national insurance rise, employers and employees coming in April, that's meant to pay to tackle NHS COVID-related backlogs. That's meant to pay for the reform of social care. So where would the money come from if you scrap those taxes?
Well, it's never going to get the chance to pay for the reform of social care because it's all going to be needed for the National Health Service. Well, again, this is where you need to grow the economy. Ultimately, if we've only got 1% growth, you compare that if we got it nearer to 2% in the OECD average over the next 10 years, that's £75 billion extra, which can go into better spending for consumers to support businesses across the economy, and also those tax receipts that fund the recovery of our public services. Ultimately, that is the answer, not a short term hit. That's actually going to choke off recovery. It's going to hit businesses in the high street and across the economy, and is actually going to, in the end, make it much harder to fund long-term sustainable public services as well.
Bill, always good to have you on the show. Thanks for that. Bill Eston there, Shadow Industry Minister, MP for Sefton up there on Merseyside, and with a perspective now from Swansea West, it's another Labour MP, Geraint Davis. Geraint, you've been making the point recently that in contrast to Boris Johnson's claim that there's a record number of people at work, there are actually around 500,000, 500,000 fewer people at work, according to the Office for National Statistics, not 400,000 more, as the Prime Minister claims, due to self-employment. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, in a nutshell, the Prime Minister's consistently been saying that there's 420,000 more people at work. But I've looked at the figures from the Office for National Statistics, and if you include self-employed people, there's 506,000 fewer. I mean, in essence, what's happened is that there's 1.4 million people registered to vote, who've basically gone back to the EU. They're in the EU, and that explains the 1.1 million vacancies. They're not new jobs, they're empty jobs. And so now there's a facility for people in self-employment to move into payroll jobs. So the figure the Prime Minister uses is that there's 420,000 more people in payroll jobs, but the number of people working overall is 506,000 down overall. And that's why we haven't got the money to pay for the services, because they're not working to pay the taxes. And when the Labour Party was last in power, we saw the economy grow by 40% in 10 years, in the 10 years of 2008, the banking crisis. And with that money, we doubled the investment in health and education. And now, since 2010, since the Conservatives have been in, the economy on trend, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, should be 40% bigger, but it isn't because of austerity. And that's why the Chancellor imposed £40 billion of tax rises last year, which is the highest we've seen, for generations. We're now at 1950s tax levels. And the simple message is, if Labour are in, they will invest to grow the economy, so taxes will go down. And in the case, economic failure results in higher taxes and cuts, which we're now seeing with the cost of living crisis with the Tories.
Day for Labour in terms of the economy. You've got your Shadow Chancellor speaking, and we will be covering that later in the show. A couple of Labour MPs on. So let me ask you this, Geraint. I know you're a pretty numerate bloke, with all respect. As we start talking about policy making now, Rachel Reeves, she wants to scrap business rates. That's a £30 billion tax. You guys also want to scrap, we now know, those national insurance rises. That's another £15 billion a year. We're looking at a 30, 40, £45 billion hole. It's all very well saying you want to scrap taxes and everybody wants that as the cost of living squeeze bites, but you've got a big hole in your numbers.
Yeah, there's a big question. You say, where's the money coming from? And there's a number of sources, of course. Clearly, we've talked about higher tax on Amazon and other tech companies that have been sort of ripping the heart out of our local retailers. My own view is we should provide a virtual hub on a regional basis so that small retailers, you can buy local in Swansea, just buy Swansea instead of Amazon, and any profits would go then to local taxpayers in terms of service. There's lots of savings that can be made in other places. In particular, if we had a Clean Air Act, for example, we're spending £20 billion a year on dirty air in terms of the NHS and lost productivity. Even if we save £3 billion on that through imposing higher standards on clean air, £3 billion a year given the interest rates of 1%, you could invest £300 billion at a 1%. You could service the debt £300 billion with that income. Obviously, I'm not proposing that as such. But again, we've got diabetes at £12 million, partly because people are sort of stuck full of processed sugar going into their food, and there should be restrictions on that. So there's those things. But the central point is that if we invest now in productive jobs that provide wealth in the future in the green economy, it might be where I am locally, for example, the tidal lagoon in Swansea to generate clean energy. It might be the electric cars, electrification of our rail system, etc. And we will face, of course, carbon border taxes in the future, and I welcome that because in Wales, where I am now, the amount of carbon in steel is half the level in China. So we need to be ahead of the game because there'll be taxes on the amount of carbon in our exports, and we need to turn around the economy to grow. So the answer to that question, as with the previous Labour government, if you can generate 40% growth in 10 years, you've got the money to double the health service and the education service without increasing tax. And in the short term, it might be the case that the overall level of obviously we need to look at borrowing as well. And the level of borrowing, the debt that Tories have left now is twice the level. It's 90% of GDP as opposed to sort of 46% that it was when the Labour left it. Nobody wants debt or to pay beyond our means.
OK, Geraint.
To grow.
We'll have to leave it. We'll have to leave it there for now, I'm afraid. Always good to have you on the show. Come back soon, and we'll carry on discussing these complex issues. Geraint Davis there, the Labour MP for Swansea South. After the break, we'll be discussing how these Plan B easings affect business across Britain, on the high street, across the hospitality sector. Stay with us. You're on the money.
Hello. It is a sparkling day of winter sunshine out there for the vast majority. It's a little fresh perhaps, but certainly tonight it's going to turn cold with a hard frost forming pretty quickly. Here's the reason why the weather's so settled at the moment. A chunky area of high pressure. But the winds go around the high like that, so they are coming down the North Sea. So it's the east coast that's seeing a fairly brisk and chilly wind, and there are a few showers. Coastal strip of Lincolnshire down into Norfolk in particular, seeing a few showers and a brisk wind. It's quite breezy across the Northern Isles. Any showers here fading away. Some patchy cloud, but for the vast majority it is blue skies and temperatures getting up to 5 to 7 degrees Celsius, touch below average. Certainly feeling cold with that breeze on the east coast, but in the sunshine, as I said. It's a cracking day generally. Quite quickly this evening though, notice how the blue hue takes hold of the map. A frost forming very quickly this evening. It's going to be a very cold night. Later in the night, cloud will spill into Northern Ireland, Western Scotland and northwest England, which will help to lift the temperatures here. But certainly across much of the south and the east, a frost and a really cold night across the south, one of the coldest of the winter so far. So a hard frost in the south on Friday morning, but then plenty of sunshine here to come on Friday. Another sunny day across the east with lighter winds. Probably feeling a bit warmer from Yorkshire down to East Anglia. But it will be cloudier further west, and I think we'll keep a lot of cloud through the day for Wales, northwest England, Northern Ireland, Western Scotland. The odd spot of drizzle over the Highlands, but for the vast majority it's dry. Temperatures maybe a touch higher, but it won't feel as warm with the cloudier skies in the west. It will probably feel a bit milder tomorrow in the east without those winds. The wind's picking up further in the northwest with a bit more patchy rain as we head through Friday night. There are weather fronts which will push in here this weekend, bringing some patchy rain to western Scotland. But for most places, it's dry this weekend with a mixture of cloudy spells and a bit of sunshine.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:25. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan, on GB News television and radio. Now, On the Money has, to say the least, warned for some time about rising price pressures throughout September, October and November, as Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey insisted inflation was, in his words, transitory, so interest rates didn't need to rise. On the Money said he was wrong. Well, now inflation has hit 5.4%, the highest since 1992. And Bailey's finally changed his tune. Yesterday, the Bank of England governor told the House of Commons Treasury Select Committee that ongoing rises in the price of natural gas and other commodities means inflation will persist.
The thing that has changed, and I would emphasise, is that when we were last here probably, and certainly when we did the November monetary policy reports, the profile of market prices of natural gas had it coming off really next summer. So it started to go back in the market pricing towards where it was pre-COVID. Now it doesn't come off until middle of next year, towards the tail end of next year. So that is a big shift, and of course it's relevant to your point about transitory shocks. That is a much longer, in terms of market pricing, elevated price of natural gas.
Now, amidst all that economic gobbledygook, the Bank of England governor was signalling there that this cost of living crisis could last around 18 months. That's not very transitory, is it? I'm still with Vicky Price. She's former director of the government's economic service, a former senior civil servant. And joining the discussion now on the end of Plan B, anti-COVID restrictions, we've got Kate Nichols, CEO of UK Hospitality, and Natalie Alexander, Director of Alexander Hancock Recruitment in Altrincham. Great to see you all. Let me go back to Vicky first, if I may. Just going back to our discussions there with those Labour MPs. Yes, it's a big day for Labour economic policy with Rachel Reeves' announcement, but they seem to be spending for definite savings that they might make in the future. It's a credibility thing, isn't it?
Well, possibly. I think there is no doubt that we need to raise the productivity level of the UK economy, but it does take some time. People have tried this, I don't know how many industrial strategies I've been involved in. But the problem is still the same, I'm afraid. Although this year they might be lucky, because what's happening with the government having introduced this super deduction, capital allowances, there is some investment going on, and there will be. So we're going to see some increase there. And there is some extra money.
So when a firm makes a big investment, it can offset the cost of that against its tax bill, right?
Absolutely. It's a temporary thing, of course. So it may just be bringing some of that investment forward. So the question is, what do you do afterwards? But nevertheless, it's good news from that point of view. It also has meant so far that even though, obviously, one doesn't get anything very much while these capital allowances are at this level, so in fact, if anything, one gives something away, what's been coming into the Exchequer has been reasonably positive. So
yes.
There's more money which has been collected.
And there may yet be room to not go ahead with those tax rises in April. But
it may. But the other thing you can do, of course, is you just borrow a little bit more.
That's a discussion for another show, Vicky. Let's go to our other guest now, if I may. Kate Nichols, great to see you here again on The Money. You are the CEO of UK Hospitality. You must be pretty pleased, all things considered, that these Plan B restrictions do now seem to be history, in England at least.
Absolutely. We very much welcome yesterday's announcement that you're scrapping Plan B and that there is a move from the government to look towards planning ahead for how we manage to live with COVID without resorting to economic restrictions, which we know now, after 2 years of them, cause very real pain to businesses and have a real impact on jobs, livelihoods, and our social and economic framework across the country. So it's really positive that we've got an early signal, work from home in particular, having a devastating effect on our city centre businesses, and that is being lifted as quickly as it possibly can, and a signal also to rebuild consumer confidence so we can start to see demand coming back into the economy, generating real GDP growth.
I agree with you. I think the ending of these restrictions could really unleash some animal spirits in the economy, as John Maynard Keynes called them, bringing investment forward, getting entrepreneurs into their stride. Also, Natalie Alexander, you're the director of Alexander Hancock Recruitment. The Prime Minister announced yesterday that the government's official working from home guidance has now been scrapped. The government's no longer advising us to work from home if we can in England. But will we ever go back to how we were, in your view, in terms of office working, 5 days a week, 9 to 5?
I think it's unlikely we're ever going to go back to how we were before. I think this hybrid working is something that's going to be staying with us for the longer term. It definitely works for some people, but I think, as I'm sure your other guests will agree with me, small businesses, the retailers, the hospitality sector, they actually rely on footfall of people going into the towns every day, buying their lunches, buying their coffees, buying their clothes, buying whatever it may be. And I actually also think that people are going to get a bit sick of working from home when they see that other people are back in the office and they are engaging more with their managers, or they're getting promotions because they're actually in situ. So I think the hybrid will stay with us for a while, possibly over the next 12 months. But I also think that small business will get a bit sick of the fact that they've not got their people in work. And again, 12 months' time may well see a whole different world again.
That will be music to the ears of your members, won't it? People running pubs, restaurants, cafes. If we do return to working at work, as it were, more than most people are assuming now.
Well, I think what you saw with COVID was an acceleration of a trend towards more remote working, more hybrid working, and that's something we're going to live with. But our businesses have been able to pivot in many of our suburban and town centre locations. They've pivoted to adapting to that. But our city centres, our major city centres, and London in particular, the economy is dependent upon workers coming in, as the other guest said. And we're seeing the businesses there in central London, they're trading at 20 to 30% of normal revenue levels. In other major metropolitan city centres, it's about 50 to 60% of normal trading levels. That's not sustainable for those businesses. And so it is vital that we get that footfall back. So working from home did have a significant economic hit on the hospitality sector, as well as retail and other city centre businesses dependent upon commuters. Important, if we're to get that engine of the economy moving again, that we get people back in, even if we spread them over a sort of different period of time over the week, we get that economy moving again.
Kate Nichols of UK Hospitality, thank you for joining us. Natalie Alexander of Alexander Recruitment, Hancock Recruitment up there in Altrincham, and of course in the studio, Vicky Price, always good to see you. Thank you to all my guests here on The Money today. Coming up, we've got Startup Britain with Alt AV, the company providing revolutionary tech for the finance sector. Stay with us for that. That's after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it is 1:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to get you up to date in the GB News newsroom. A senior Conservative MP has accused the government of intimidating MPs who tried to remove Boris Johnson. William Ragg urged MPs to report any blackmail attempts to the police if they feel they've been pressured by the government for calling on the Prime Minister to resign. Boris Johnson says he's seen no evidence to support any of those allegations. The Bury South MP who defected from the Conservatives says the Labour Party will give the country the leadership it deserves, not one they are embarrassed by. At a speech at his constituency, Christian Wakeford says the Conservative Party aren't even talking about the problem, let alone offering solutions. A new report has found that former Pope Benedict XVI failed to take action in 4 cases of alleged child abuse while he was the Archbishop in Germany. The investigation looked into allegations of sexual abuse at a Roman Catholic church in Munich between 1945 and 2019. The former Pope strictly denies the accusations. The number of students choosing to study nursing has surged since the start of the pandemic. UCAS has revealed a record 28,800 students in England selected a nursing course as their first choice last year when applying to university. Nearly 7 in 10 18-year-olds say COVID inspired them to apply. 3 of Banksy's most famous artworks from Robbie Williams' collection will go on auction this spring. The pieces by the anonymous street artist who hails from Bristol are estimated to be worth millions each. The collection, including pop art image Girl with Balloon, will go under the hammer at Sotheby's on the 2nd of March. You are up to date. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. We've got a short break now, and then we're back to On the Money with Liam.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back at 1:37. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, we've been discussing on the show today the end of Plan B COVID restrictions in England, and we've also touched on today's speech by Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves in Bury. And here she is.
I've been hearing the same from the businesses I talk to, concerned that customers will stay away as they feel the hit to their purse and to their wallet. It's a vicious circle. Tory policies failure to deliver growth. And so their response is policies that further squeeze that growth. It's like trying to drive a car with the brakes on. It's no wonder that the Tories have failed to deal with the cost of living crisis, because the Tories are the cost of living crisis. We need a serious plan to deliver higher growth, built on the knowledge that wealth doesn't just trickle down from the top, but it comes from the bottom up and the middle out. We can drive up living standards, fund the public services we need, and get our national debt falling. Under Keir Starmer's leadership, Labour has changed, but so too have the Conservatives.
Some strong words there from the Shadow Chancellor. And GB News national reporter Paul Hawkins is in Bury. He gets around where Rachel Reeves indeed just outlined her 5-point plan for the economy. Paul, great to see you in Greater Manchester. How's the atmosphere? Any sense of how this pretty landmark speech by the Shadow Chancellor has gone down?
Yeah, I mean, it went down okay with the Labour Parliamentary Party that were there. I think people here are kind of just getting on with their lives, really. I mean, I did ask them about the cut in bills, in energy bills, the cut in VAT on energy bills to try and help with the cost of living crisis that the Shadow Chancellor outlined in her speech, and they said that was obviously a good thing. They want to do that. But generally speaking, a lot of people here, if they are going to talk about politics, most people are just getting on with their lives. If they are going to talk about it, they're going to talk about that defection from Christian Wakeford to the Labour Party, really. A lot of people trying to get their heads around it, and a lot of people kind of broadly agreeing with the principle of why he switched, but equally saying, why hasn't there been a by-election? Why we didn't even know that an MP could switch sides and it wouldn't automatically trigger a by-election. She was asked about that in the press conference, and I'll just read you what she said. She said, you'll remember in the last Parliament, many Labour MPs left the Labour Party. I didn't call then for there to be by-elections, and I won't call for a by-election now. I would say to the government, if you want a by-election in Bury South, let's have a by-election in every constituency. It's called a general election, and let's see what the country think about the direction the Tories are taking this country in. So, a bit of a weird answer, and I have to say some of the words that have been mentioned here when we talk about why they haven't had a by-election from some of the people that I've been speaking to, words that include anti-democratic and slippery.
Paul, great to see you, and thanks a lot for joining us on The Money. Paul Hawkins there, GB News national correspondent in Bury, where Rachel Reeves gave that speech, and indeed Christian Wakeford, the Tory MP who defected so theatrically before PMQs yesterday, before Prime Minister's questions in the Commons, he actually introduced the Shadow Chancellor, having been a member of the Labour Party for a single day. Joining me now to analyse Labour's economic policy is Michael Jacobs. He used to advise both former Labour Prime Minister Gordon Brown and former leader Jeremy Corbyn. He's now the Professor of Political Economy at the University of Sheffield. Michael, I've much enjoyed our discussions about economic policy over the years. Great to have you here on the money. So Labour had a 5-point plan in the days of Tony Blair when he was trying to change the perception of the Labour Party. Now Rachel Reeves has got one too.
Yes, and it seems to me to be rather a sensible plan. There's nothing very surprising, I think, about this. The Labour Party, Rachel Reeves says, is now pro-business. Well, it has to be pro-business. The economy is made up of businesses. The idea that we were ever a party against business was clearly ludicrous. She says that the cap on public investment that the Chancellor Rishi Sunak has put in place would be removed by Labour. That's obviously sensible. The country is crying out for investment. And as she said, that cap of 3% of GDP of public investment means that some of the things that Boris Johnson himself wants, like HS2 going up to Leeds and the cross Pennine rail link in the north, can't happen because of that cap. So getting rid of that's very sensible. She's got an ambitious plan for climate investment, but everybody who's looked at climate change thinks that that is needed. So all these things that she's announced today, and some of them are repeated, seem to me to be rather sensible. And in a way, I'd almost put this back to you, Liam. You know, we've argued in the past about left and right in economic policy. Was there anything in that speech that you didn't agree with? Because I do think that actually when people look at it, they'll say this is a pretty sensible plan for the country. The country's economy is not doing well. We need those kinds of policies to make it better.
OK, Michael, I'll come back to you. Hang on to your hat. What struck me as I read the speech is that I do think Rachel Reeves is a credible person, former Bank of England economist. I've said it many times here on The Money and indeed in my Sunday Telegraph column. But how about this? She wants to scrap business rates, that much hated tax on business premises. That's 30 billion quid. She wants to scrap now the national insurance rises that are coming in April. That's another 15 billion quid a year. That's a 45 billion pound annual hole. So what taxes are Labour going to put up?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, and I'm sure that Labour Party will announce those. I'm not privy to Rachel Reeves's policy ideas at this moment. She said that she'll abolish business rates, but not that means that businesses won't pay tax. The reason that she wants to abolish business rates is one that many businesses, and I'm sure they've been on your programme, will tell you, which is that business rates as currently levied penalise businesses that improve their premises. And they in particular penalise businesses that have large premises. So retailers on the high street, whom we all want to see survive, pay high taxes, whereas online retailers like Amazon pay almost no business rates because they don't have the premises. That doesn't seem fair. It doesn't help our town centres. So as I understand it, her proposal is not that businesses won't pay a tax, but that Labour would replace business rates with a business tax, which would more fairly cover different kinds of businesses. On the national insurance rise, this is, I think, a very interesting one. What Labour have said is that it's unfair for that the tax to be levied only on working people under the retirement age, because, of course, it's on national insurance, which older people who are still working don't pay, and it's only on income from work. And as she pointed out in this speech, and she has before, taxes on wealth, on the income you get, for example, from capital gains or from dividends, if you are a shareholder, are taxed at lower rates than income from work. And I think many people, and of course, almost all economists would say, those rates should at least be the same. And from a fairness point of view, in general, people who have income from capital are wealthier. So what she's saying is that it's not fair on working people that they are going to pay for this, but those people who earn their money or get their money from capital are not. Those things, I think, will be very widely understood and accepted and agreed with by the British public, and most economists would agree with them too.
Michael, in the end, as you know, you've been knocking about at the top of the Labour Party for a very long time, if I may say so. That's we're both getting on, aren't we? But in the end, it comes down to credibility. We both know, as do our viewers and listeners, that UK general elections are won in the centre ground. That was Tony Blair's insight. Has Labour really moved on, as Rachel Reeves says, from the era of Jeremy Corbyn? Because if you're going to win this general election or even challenge the Tories at the general election as and when it comes, you're going to have to convince Middle Britain, as it were, that you have.
Well, just to correct something you said at the beginning, I never advised Jeremy Corbyn. I did work a bit with John McDonnell on some of his economic plans and his preparations before the last election. But I think Labour has moved on. But I think it's really important that we don't mistake where the centre ground now lies. There's no question that you have to persuade lots and lots of voters who are in the centre, who are even on the right of politics, if you're a Labour Party, to vote for you. And that does mean sounding credible. And I think Rachel Reeves does sound like a very credible alternative chancellor. And that's an important part of Labour's appeal, in the same way that Keir Starmer is looking more and more like a credible alternative prime minister, in my view, and I think many people's view. But what the centre means, I think, is not going to be the same in every era. When Labour first came into government in 1997, we had an economy that was growing rather well. Where we had a lot of people in jobs, we had people consuming more every year. They felt like they were getting better off, and that was a legacy, as you will remember, of falling out of the exchange rate mechanism earlier in that decade. We don't have an economy today that is working well. We have an economy that has low investment. We're still coming out of the COVID crisis. We have huge inequalities, as Rachel Reeves said today, between the south of England and the rest of the country. And that means we will need a more activist economic policy to cope with those things. So I don't think it's correct to say that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are returning to New Labour in the sense of the policies, because the policies now are going to be for a different era when the economy is not doing so well. But I do think that their general approach is moderate, it's sensible, and I think many people, including you, I notice you haven't answered my question, are likely to look at this speech that Rachel Reeves has made today and say, look, I cannot find anything to disagree with. And I think once you've got people on the right of politics, the businessmen and women and others who are not attached to the Labour Party saying, this looks like a sensible plan to me, then I think you could probably say Labour is on its way back.
Michael Jacobs, fair comment. Always good to have you on the show. Come into the studio and we can carry on the discussion. Michael Jacobs there, foreign advisor to various Labour leaders and shadow chancellors. And now it's time for my interview series here on The Money. It's Startup Britain, showcasing some of the UK's most interesting and innovative new companies. Today, we have our very own digital transformation guru. That's Chris Ansara. He's the founder and CEO of Alt AV, a tech company which manages regulatory processes within the financial industry. Stay with us. We will explain what that means. Each year, the UK financial sector alone posts out 5.2 billion physical documents to customers, costing £1.7 billion and using a staggering 2.4 million trees. Chris Ansara wants to cut down on that waste, creating an alternative to paper signatures that's easily and widely used. Docstribute is his solution, bringing, as he says, paperless alternatives across the globe. And here he is, our latest Startup Britain guest. It's Chris Ansara. Chris, great to see you in the studio. Now, I know UK entrepreneurs are resilient, but your business, it was registered just before lockdown began, but you've actually built your business during lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess like everyone in the UK, we've been struck with those challenges, but we've made the most of it, and we're super excited about what we're doing.
So just tell us what your business does, because for quite a few years, I've been sort of getting documents through the post from various banks and all the rest of it. And in the old days, you used to have to print it out, sign it, scan it back into the printer, send it. You're trying to get around those difficulties, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned in the build-up, the sector is massively reliant on paper. We see, as you said, 5.3 billion documents being consumed by the sector on an annual basis at a massive, massive cost, not just financially, but also environmentally.
Yeah, sure. All those trees.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we come in. We streamline the process for financial services companies. We make it easier for them to distribute regulated or mandatory communication. I guess the clever bit is we use distributed ledger technology to do that. But fundamentally, we focus on benefits, things like improving cybersecurity, reducing costs, but also reducing the impact on the environment.
And how does your business actually make money, and how many people do you employ?
Yeah, so obviously how we make money is by providing services. We're a software as a service business, and that means we have subscription fees to join on or sign up onto our platform, which is fantastic. At the moment, we're roughly 9 people. We're 9 people as a company, so we're growing, which is super exciting and something that we're looking forward to grow even more. Yeah.
And the UK is pretty good at this kind of, what we call it, fintech stuff, right? It's applying technology to the financial services industry. Does what you do, does what your company provides, the sector you're in, can it spread beyond finance? Could you help a small business in the regions that's got nothing to do with finance, that's doing something completely different, but still needs to have documentation flowing between itself and its customers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about, we position ourselves on trust, and it's the trust and the integrity of those documents. So, of course, financial services sector is where we started, and that's where our heritage is. But there's great opportunity, not just in the financial services sector. Think about utilities, think about the health sector, and then, of course, small business as well. So yeah, we're working with both ends of the scale, big business as well as small businesses.
Now, you're obviously a very determined guy to start up a business during lockdown. We know a lot of people here in the UK did that. Yeah. They kind of seized the opportunity to think, God, my life's being taken out of my hands. I want to control my own destiny. I don't know what's going to happen to my employer. I'm going to start a business. What's the business environment like here in the UK for someone like you, a startup entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think the UK is incredible for startups. I mean, there's a lot of firstly, we've got an abundance of talent. There's really great training in the tech space as well. But also, there's lots of initiatives. For example, Innovate UK is a great example of how they support startups.
And you accessed a grant, didn't you? Yeah. I understand your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So it wasn't just.
Was that complicated to get that money? Do you have to ever pay it back?
No, it's a grant. Sure. But of course, there are things that you need to adhere to.
There's admin you got to go through. Was it a difficult process? Because a lot of people listening will be thinking, why can't I get a grant?
Well, it is a difficult process, and rightly so. I think ultimately
public money.
Yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, they kind of look at a number of things, and we ticked a few boxes. So it wasn't just about being innovative; it was how we're going to contribute back into the economy, how are we going to reduce carbon emissions, which is obviously a massively important theme currently, and something that we need to be considerate about. So there's a number of different criteria that you need to adhere to in order to get a grant. But yeah, I mean, going back to the initial question, yeah. I think the UK is absolutely a great place for startups, and we're delighted to be starting our business, yeah.
Are you concerned about incoming tax rises, about incoming corporation tax increases in 2023, about the sense that the economy, well, Rachel Reeves is claiming, the Shadow Chancellor, is getting kind of snarled up?
Yeah, I mean, look, our focus is providing the most streamlined and energy-efficient digital solutions for our customers. That's what our focus is on, and that's kind of where we're investing our energy, I guess.
Great to meet you, Chris. Just briefly, I always ask this of Startup Britain guests, of whom you are the latest, of course. What do you say to people watching this who are thinking, maybe I can start a business? What's your, in a nutshell, advice to them?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds cliche, but start it. I think this, you don't regret it. It's great.
Just get going.
Get going, and the sooner you start, the sooner you start to see progress, and have a vision. For us, it's about reducing carbon emissions, and I think that's a good way to steer us forward.
And making money, of course. You're a business, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Great to meet you, Chris Ansari, the founder and CEO of Alt AV, our latest Startup Britain guest here on The Money. And that's all we got time for today. But thanks for joining me, whether you're watching on GB News television or listening on GB News DAB radio. I'm grateful for your time. We're back tomorrow, same time, same place. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
Hello. It is a sparkling day of winter sunshine out there for the vast majority. It's a little fresh perhaps, but certainly tonight it's going to turn cold with a hard frost forming pretty quickly. Here's the reason why the weather's so settled at the moment. A chunky area of high pressure. But the winds go around the high like that, so they are coming down the North Sea. So it's the east coast that's seeing a fairly brisk and chilly wind, and there are a few showers. Coastal strip of Lincolnshire down into Norfolk in particular, seeing a few showers and a brisk wind. It's quite breezy across the Northern Isles. Any showers here fading away. Some patchy cloud, but for the vast majority it is blue skies, and temperatures getting up to 5 to 7 degrees Celsius, touch below average.